Hi, so I'm here with the next episode in the 4.0 Impact Series. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined with Felix Hallwachs from a not-for-profit social business called Little Sun. And I'm proud to say that 4.0 will be partnering with Little Sun to support them in their charitable endeavors. Moving on. So look, I'll just jump straight into it. Felix, if you mind introducing yourself and giving us a bit more insight into Little Sun, I suppose starting with the problem as you see it, and then I guess moving on to Little Sun's solution to that problem.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me. And it's a real pleasure. We've spoken a few times, and I think we really share a set of values and interests, and it's always really nice to talk about things that we have in common in the world, especially when it's about moving a transition forward. So my name is Felix. I'm a German based in Berlin. I'm an architect by training. I've worked for many years in the art world, and out of that engagement in the art world, the project Little Sun evolved and developed. It's a project delivering solar-powered energy to off-grid areas, and I'll explain that a little bit. Founded by an artist and an engineer, a very famous artist whom I was working with beforehand, Olafur Eliasson. And when we began this project, for some crazy reason, it seemed possible to do it. None of us came from solar energy, the engineer a little bit. None of us came from real international collaboration, development work. So we were all new to this. We've been active for 10 years now, and we basically started and created a solar-powered product. It's a small Little Sun lamp. This is actually an original from 12 years ago, which I've been keeping. It's very simple.
So
it has a solar panel in the background, in the back.
Right.
So it's this is 5 by 5 centimeters. It's kind of like the smallest sensibly usable solar panel that you can use for anything. And then it has an LED light in here and gives you light for night. So it's kind of like taking the sun from the sky, and harnessing it and having a light to feel resourceful. Now, we made this looking at children in Ethiopia, largely, as the first project. And because of the population of over 100 million people in Ethiopia, over 80 million people do not have access to grid energy.
Wow.
And which is 80 million people, that's like the population of Germany. So that's a very, very, very serious amount of people. And this phenomenon of not having access to energy is a huge challenge to basically everything in your life, crazily. So you and I are speaking now courtesy of energy that's powering our computers, that's powering Zoom. I switch on the lights here with a whiff of a button. That doesn't hold true for almost 1 billion people in the world. Over 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa do not have access to energy. And not having access to energy means that people either are in the dark, use kerosene lanterns for lighting. So simply put a little bit of kerosene into a small glass and light a wick in that. It means cooking happens through chopping down wood and having rather open fires in dwellings. It means that you cannot charge your phone. It means that you obviously do not have a computer. So there are hindrances across all aspects of life. The United Nations term access to energy is one of the basic fundamental needs to enable development. There is one of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDG number 7, is affordable access to clean energy. So we looked at this as an opportunity. We thought, well, crazily, solar panels, again, are now good enough and cheap enough. LEDs are good enough and cheap enough. Batteries are good enough and cheap enough.
Yeah.
We could make a lamp. Great. Let's make a lamp as the first step of the energy ladder. And then later on, let's make more products to take people across a ladder first. And maybe we can actually make it an escalator to enable fully sustainable powering of homes, of business, of life, essentially. And what we said when we looked at working in Ethiopia was, we came all from Western Europe. So again, a bunch of white people looking at this issue. We had friends in Ethiopia at the time. And so it was really important for us from the beginning and onset of the project on not to make a lamp for a poor person, but to make something, the design of which was happy, fun, prosperous. So this was actually made in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian national flower is something like a yellow daisy. It's called the mescal flower.
Right, okay.
Yellow. And so this was appreciated as looking Ethiopian. It's also obviously a reference to the sun quite clearly. And then you see the dynamic of the blades. It's almost like a turbine as well. And all of this together differentiates it from other little solar lanterns and other problem-solving devices. And this is, I think, because obviously we come from this idea of communicating through art. And the resonance on this was incredibly high. Everyone we talked to really appreciated this idea of collaborating. And we realized, well, you know, if you're raising a family in rural Ethiopia or in rural Germany, there's really no difference. You want a happy, prosperous life. You have aspirations.
Yeah.
You want that life to be powered. And ideally, you want kids to be powerful and resourceful. You want them to feel like they can pull the energy of the sun from the sky, right? And that's kind of this ability, this opportunity sits symbolically within this small lamp. We've hence diversified our project range. We now do a lot of other solar powered things, more on that later. But this is how it all began. So we manufacture these lamps and we run projects that talk about solar energy access. And we deliver larger solar energy units into at least 2 main countries in sub-Saharan Africa and 2 countries where we partially work. So we're a tiny outfit still, but we love this idea of showcasing renewable energy, of symbolically sharing it, but also of actually doing. So taking the thinking about renewables to doing very pragmatically, while shining a light on solar energy.
No, very nice. And what it's a very noble cause, and I'll be honest, you've quoted some very, very big numbers there. In terms of the amount of people without access to clean energy or electricity. I'm interested. Could you elaborate more in terms of like the application? For instance, of the Little Sun product. We've talked previously about the linking it directly to education and the ability to educate, etc. So could you elaborate on that, Felix?
So the original lamp, again, it was made targeting women and children on our part. And the distribution began through a small micro-entrepreneurship program in Ethiopia and in Zimbabwe and Kenya with an NGO who was running entrepreneurial programs. So the idea was always to, in an ideal scenario, have local economies build on moving this lamp. It became apparent that the lamp works really well in basically any scenario without access to energy, because if you replace a kerosene lantern, you are also saving a lot of household spending for kerosene.
Right.
And you obviously have a much better quality of light. You have less eye infections, you have less respiratory issues. So there are a lot of good factors. And this of course comes as natural when you look at children. We also looked at what do kids do at home in the evening. And we started talking to a few teachers in Ethiopia. And it turned out in many of the rural areas, kids, if they have the privilege of going to school, they will have to help the family in the afternoon. And time for homework would be limited to evening hours, and sitting next to a kerosene lantern and reading is really difficult. So we started saying, well, what if we work together with schools to get lamps to kids as an educational tool? And we started doing that actually by way of grant funding, of donation funding. That was when we transitioned into the nonprofit area. And we got really, really positive feedback from the Ministry of Education in Ethiopia and from teachers we talked to, that kids' performance actually got better in school. And it turned out, so for one, they had more time to do homework. Secondly, they had a safer pathway to school if they had to go to school in the early morning hours when it was still dark. This is a safety device across the roads.
Okay.
There were side effects like, the grandfather of one kid saying now he didn't have to fear breaking his leg when he went to the loo during the night. And other, to me, more far away things like someone saying, well, it's great because, now the lions don't come close. I'm not afraid of the lions anymore. I'm like, okay, that's very much not my life. But we really appreciated that we've created a tool that is more versatile than we had thought. And of course, that also always reinforced the fact that the need is really immense, and that the luxury that we live with here, with all the power supply, which is, by the way, in question now through the Ukraine war, which is also interesting. For the first time, we have a feeling of what it may be like to have a cold winter, for example. But that said, so this idea of bringing these lamps to kids was quite clear. Then we have a second unit, which is slightly bigger, and it charges mobile phones. And I don't have it around me. Anyway,
don't have one there.
So it has a 4 times as large solar panel. It also has a light, but also a USB button, so you can kind of, you can plug in your phone. And that obviously is interesting to anyone who has a phone. The target there for us began working with community health workers, many of whom by now use digital platforms on smartphones to better service the people in their community.
Right.
But it needs to be charged. So we have these applications like the lamp for kids, where or the charger for health workers, which are really very clearly linked to education and to health. But I think in general, our ambition is to offer this notion of being able to harness the energy of the sun. And we talk a lot to people in the communities where we work. We try to understand what opportunities there are, what challenges there are, and we've been now in the past year especially looking at having a lamp is fantastic. Obviously, having an education that is better or more easily attained with a lamp is really, really great. That's an investment into the future. But when push comes to shove, you need money to live right now. So what we're looking at right now is solar-powered productivity tools for smallholder farming. That could be water pump irrigation. That could be post-harvest processing, milling, grinding, or drying, so that you could actually add a value step to your work. And that could also simply be a cold chain. That's the really interesting thing right now in this off-grid area. Cooling has a huge opportunity of preventing food loss, of raising the potential for earnings for smallholder farmers. Oh, apologies. And so we're venturing into these other areas, which are really more about the opportunity of developing value chains and developing income in rural communities through solar power. And I think the lamp will always, this will be the symbol of it. This shows you solar works. This puts it into your hand. You can touch it. It's a no-brainer. It's really easy. And kids in Germany love this thing as well. We sell it in bookstores.
Yeah, look, my kids would love that. My kids would love that.
Totally. And they will feel connected to the sun. It's like this little pet that they have, right? They set it out into the sun, it charges, and then they have that energy. And that success, that essentially, even though your kids don't need it, they would also love it. That then again would connect them to a kid in Ethiopia who may need it more, but will also love it in the same way. And I think this, to me, that's really important, this idea that we're together in this world and that we're actually much more interconnected than we tend to assume. And I've learned this in this project. Again, I had no prior experience working in sub-Saharan Africa. I had no prior experience working in development collaboration. I didn't have experience in producing technical goods, which this is. So it's been a huge learning curve. But one of the biggest learnings was, of course, that a nurse in Zimbabwe who worked with us, Mercy, she had the exact same aspirations for her kid as I do. We have kids the same age, right? So they were both babies and they were both changing diapers, and so I think one of the greatest values of Little Sun is this factor. And we really need to understand, and this holds more true for the global north than for the so-called global south, we need to understand how to use the resources of this planet wisely. We need to transition, it, right? 4.0. We need to transition to a completely different way of handling the world. And what we're working on, this off-grid energy question is that's kind of a niche in that. The people that we are catering to are not the people creating the emissions. You know, it's not about, technically we do save CO2 compared to burning kerosene, but I emit much more than most households in sub-Saharan Africa on a daily basis through my being a German in Germany. And that's really interesting. That's a part that's been driving this project strongly as well. So we're a social business, we're a nonprofit, mental nonprofit that runs social business on the ground for impact. We would love to see scaling in our solutions, but really it's also about influencing people left and right to adopt renewable energy.
Understood. Yeah, look, I'm interested if you could. This might have kind of caught you, a little bit off guard, etc. But in terms of the actual impact, have you got any? Can you give us like any insight in terms of numbers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me just ring that up so I don't.
Sorry, I should
say something wrong. But we've created over 1 million of these units. Wow. And what I have right now here is our impact numbers from the end of last year. So this is half a year old, but we've distributed 1.4 million Little Sun products worldwide. We've distributed 28,000 of our Little Sun charger units in areas without access to electricity. We have, in theory, through delivering these lamps to students, enabled 139,898,384 extra well-lit study hours. We've distributed a total of 869,000 Little Sun products in areas without energy access. And in that theory, we have improved access to energy for over 4 million people. Cumulatively, over the lifespan of our products that are out to date, people in off-grid areas will be saving $175 million on energy expenditure compared to using kerosene or candles. And we have avoided 1 million metric tons of CO2 emissions, again, over the lifetime of our products and compared to burning fossil fuels for light. Yeah. And we've displaced over 800,000 kerosene lanterns, because at least a large part of the communities where we work would use this lamp to get rid of a kerosene lantern. Of course. That wasn't rehearsed, but you definitely know your numbers. And look, the numbers speak for themselves. That's absolutely amazing in terms of the level of impact, and obviously still going. I suppose my last question, and look, thank you very much for so much insight, is you've talked about the kind of future of the product set, but in terms of the scalability of I suppose of the company, it's via like a partnership model, NGOs on the ground, like empowering local partners, etc. Is that kind of where you're going with it? Yeah, we're going with this idea of social business on the ground in an ideal scenario. Yeah. So we need nonprofit funding to buy, let's say, a grain mill, solar-powered grain mill, or a multifunctional platform that offers milling and other husking services, for example, for community. I think what we envision is really having in small rural communities, having a Little Sun solar energy hub that offers a lot of different tools for the community. Yeah. And the community should be making money through using these tools and should be paying for the use of these tools. It's doubtful right now that the income from that would allow the entire project setup, would allow really importing the necessary units and setting everything up and doing it. That's why we have this idea of a nonprofit mantle funding to bring in things, but then ideally the local team that does the maintenance, that potentially increases activity, all of that should and could be paid for by local turnover. Right. The idea is to really understand, so we have kind of a 4-set approach. You have to understand that the technical need and opportunity, you have to understand the value chain. So can a farmer make more money if they mill something? You have to figure out how to create market access for the farmer in the rural area. And then you have to train everyone in this process to actually ensure that the machinery as a whole works. And if you will, this is kind of like the holy grail of the energy access conversation. How do you create renewable energy powered, let's call it installations or setups, that really allow for a community to grow, to have more opportunity, to have, through that system, access to finance, have access to better productivity, have access to all the things that even a small lamp starts to deliver to you at home. And so on a personal individual level, on a household level, and on a community level, how can solar energy and renewable energy as a whole create opportunity? And we really believe it's a holistic approach that is necessary. So we think that we are reasonably good at soliciting donations and finding grant funding as a European entity. But we think our teams in Senegal and Zambia, for example, are much better at figuring out what the local business model and value chain is. And so they're thinking as a social business. So it's not about return on investment, but it is really about understanding the value chain for the farmer. It's understanding the farmer's business, and it's understanding our local entity's business, because we want to see scalability. And I run around and search for grant funding so I could potentially begin more of these projects. I could buy more vehicles. We're looking right now to set up a solar-powered milk collection center in Zambia for smallholder farmers who have a few cows each to be able to bring in some milk. Essentially, it's just a milk cooling device.
Okay.
And then we asked the local dairy if they would offtake the milk, and they're interested. So there we are bringing in the technology, we're creating the central station, we are working with a farmers cooperative, we're working with a milk cooperative, and we are talking to the dairy as a customer. And interesting, this is a total side story, but Zambia imports milk, even though there are enough cows in the country to deliver enough milk for everyone. So there's a macroeconomic question to this. There's a trade deficit in milk. A lot of milk is powdered milk. It's not really as good. And the cows that are there are delivering milk that goes bad in individual farmers because there is no market access. So we learned a lot since we started with the lamp, where it was about manufacturing and how we bring it somewhere, to understanding that it's a very complex scenario, and you really have to look at everything from the technology to the community to all the parties involved. These could be NGOs, could be cooperatives, could be government, could be private business even, to creating a technical offering and market access ideally. And if all of that works out, we'll be speaking in a year about how many, less about how many tons of CO2 we displaced, but maybe more about how much income smallholder farmers generated using our productivity sets. Which I think is really interesting, right? So that would be an impact that to me is really a very, very interesting one.
Well, look, we call this the impact series, and the idea of it is to shine a light on businesses and individuals that are basically leading with impact for the greater good. And I mean, look, this has been eye-opening. It all started with just a little plastic solar panel solar powered lantern, and the impact is absolutely huge. So look, it's been a really interesting chat. I really appreciate you jumping on this, and I'm very enthusiastic and looking forward to basically supporting for 4-0 to be supporting Little Sun in terms of some kind of donation partnership for the work that we do in Europe, and I'll make sure that all your details and where people can find you and how people can kind of get involved and more about your mission is going to be very well documented and pushed out for our social channels. So but Felix, once again, thank you very much for jumping on this, and it's a very inspirational story and mission that you guys are on. So it's long may it continue.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
All towards net zero. Thank you.
Cheers, Felix.